Kelsea, if you don't mind, once again, welcome from Vangst. Why don't you tell us? Oh, you're both there. Fantastic. So we have Kelsea Appelbaum and Andrew Freeman, correct, from Vangst, and phoning it in from Colorado today, correct?
Yep, we are dialing in from sunny Denver.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. And we know Vangst is an industry leader in this space and was one of the first to really specialize in cannabis. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about the company and then a little bit about you.
Sure. So we work with a company called Vangst. We are recruiters within the cannabis space, though we have transitioned into hemp as well. We partner with companies around the world to help build out their teams, anything from entry-level roles with individuals that don't have experience in the industry all the way up to C-level executives and everywhere in between. Andrew and I have been with Vangst. We're some of the original employees.
Yeah, over 3 years.
Fantastic.
The company's been around since 2015. And so we have several different service and product offerings, including like lower level temp work, like trimmers, packagers, grow techs. We also do full-time and contract placements. That's Kelsea and I's division. And then we do have a recruiting platform that's going to be more of like a software platform to help people search for talent in the industry.
Fantastic. And to be there since the beginning, that's dog years in cannabis industry.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so welcome. So tell us a little bit about well, here I got a list of questions I'll work from rather than going off the fly. Could you tell us a little bit? You said you've been Vangst has been focusing on cannabis industry since 2015. So you'll both have seen tremendous change in that field. Do you know about how many jobs typically Vangst posts or cycles through in a period?
Sure. It really just depends on the season, as well as just what the growth trends are looking like. I would say on average, though, we're working on anywhere, probably like 100+ roles a month on the direct hire side. On our temporary hiring team as well, aka our gigs team, that's once again very much fluctuating. So anywhere between 20 to 100 roles depending on the season. Season being if it's near Croptober.
Right.
Here in Colorado, there might be an influx, 100+ jobs open any given day. But yeah, we're seeing lots of jobs that we can work on either sides of the business. And like we mentioned, any level in between entry level all the way to C-level executives, especially with companies, at this point ranging in different verticals, we're able to just kind of partner with those companies on a multitude of roles on a monthly basis.
Fantastic. And so in addition to those jobs that are posted, I imagine you also get people that come to you and say, hey, I don't know where to start. Can I post myself up as a potential employee? Can I add my resume and that sort of thing? So there's that opportunity to participate too, right?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of candidates, especially me. I do a lot of technical roles. I have a lot of growers, extractors, people from the black market, or from just corporate America that are interested in finding new positions. So we have, of course, our recruiting database, which is for the recruiters to look through. We also do have a recruiting platform, so you can create a profile and tell the world a little bit more about yourself and your skills, both from outside and inside of cannabis. So that's going to be available to clients and companies to look through. So there will actually be a database available for candidates to get their information out there.
Great. And so we want our students to be connected. We know we talk to a lot of people who say, I've done X job for all my life, or I have this tremendous experience in this field, but I want to come to cannabis. And a lot of people feel they have to reinvent themselves and leave all their experience and all that behind. And we really try to talk to people about transferable skills, and that you don't have to start over, and you don't have to be a grower to participate, or you don't have to be a retail employee. Could you talk a little bit about the variety of jobs? I know you talked about tech. There are growing jobs, there are trimmers, but there's a number of other types of jobs that you probably help to post and help to fill, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really fun because over the years of just working in the cannabis space, I think there's a lot more diversity in the types of roles we're seeing now. 3-4 years ago when Andrew and I were first starting off with Vangst, we were a small company, really just doing some analysis on what roles existed. And a lot of times these companies needed individuals with cannabis expertise. That is definitely not the case anymore. A lot of the roles that you're seeing in the cannabis industry exist outside of the industry as well. A really good example just being marketing roles. A lot of times our clients are looking for a director of marketing and they don't come from cannabis. They come from CPG backgrounds. They come from startup backgrounds where someone's just used to hitting the ground running. That's even the same on the technical and operations-based roles. A lot of times these companies that maybe Andrew's partnering with might still want cannabis industry experience, but they're willing to trade that out if someone maybe has a PhD. Little things like that are making the industry a lot more welcoming to individuals that are just transitioning in. I focus on retail and lead our retail operations. So with that, I partner with companies that are growing specifically in new markets on the retail side, so opening dispensaries. It's pretty 50-50 on if a company wants someone with cannabis industry experience or not. The fact of the matter is the experience in this industry is still somewhat limited. So a really great example is I have a company right now who is looking for a director of retail operations that needs to have experience opening and managing 50 plus locations on a nationwide basis. That doesn't exist in cannabis. So that's a really great opportunity from someone from outside the industry to actually transition in and understand this industry in a completely different capacity.
That's a great example. And you know, and you all probably see it as well, a lot of people who are running these businesses now, and this is not to say anything bad about them, but they just have very little experience. They might come as somebody who's super passionate, loves cannabis, is a true believer. They might be a patient and want to proselytize the good news about how this can make their life better. But as far as running a business, that part might be very new to them. And so what you can bring to a company like you were talking about, the experience of a retail manager, outside experience coming into the industry, we really need, you know, at all levels. And so, so it's nice to have you all here today to talk about how you do that, because that's how we mature as an industry. And we hope always the Academy is one of those places, it's a good bridge to help you, you know, begin to think about the cannabis industry, to develop that good base knowledge so that when you walk in, you've shown the respect to the industry. You're participating in the jargon and the research and the news, and you're up to date. So that's not a piece you have to catch up on. Yeah. What's the thing you find yourself coaching cannabis job seekers most frequently about?
Yeah, compliance.
Compliance is a big one. I actually find, you know, as a recruiter, I recruited before getting into cannabis as well. A lot of it is about how it's just basic interview skills, especially about giving your pitch. In a lot of cases, the interview starts out, you do quick introductions. The company might tell you a bit about the role that they want to interview you for, and then they say, tell me about yourself. And I've had the good fortune of being able to listen to some interviews before where candidates take, you know, 15 minutes sometimes to do their introduction, to really pitch themselves. I'm realizing, man, I don't even remember what they were talking about at the beginning of their speech. Teaching them how to explain themselves really effectively, hopefully in, you know, 3 to 5 minutes. So the company or the interviewers can take that information and ask more questions, because in a lot of cases they want to expand on certain points of your experience. And I think it's a lot easier if you start with a shorter spiel about yourself and then let them kind of expand, because there's so much information in cannabis, and there's so much, you know, so many unique stories about how you got into cannabis and what your experience has been, that I find a lot of people want to give a lot of information to the interviewers, but it's great to try and just give a more limited first introduction. And I think a lot of companies will take different parts of your introduction and they'll figure out what they want to know more about you. And it depends on the client, depends on the company, the role. So yeah, I typically find it's best to really just coach people on basic communication skills.
Yeah, and I think with that too, it's not just coaching them on the communication skills, but also the best way to highlight their background. If a company is looking for someone that doesn't come from the industry, chances are they're going to be pretty particular about what they're looking for. So making sure that we're helping our candidates that we're partnering with understand how to really enhance those qualities and lead with those qualities. So like Andrew said, you know, someone's not getting distracted on the call or thinking that maybe someone's not a good fit because they're dragging on about the wrong type of applicable experience. The cannabis industry is filled with a lot of particular companies and executives. And it's just something that we've learned over years of doing this. And the best way we set up our team internally up for success, our candidates and our clients up for success, is being extremely detailed in everything we do. Andrew and I, when we first started with Vangst, we were in a 12 by 12 room, more or less sharing desks. And it's obviously grown, you know, tenfold from there. But the approach is still pretty much the same. We take a very hands-on approach with our recruiting tactics. It's not just, you know, we send over resumes and hope that it's a good fit. We really handpick people that we think are good fits, whether they have industry experience or not, and then guide them through that process so that they ideally can either transition into the industry or understand the takeaways of why this wasn't the right time.
And that's a great example of why working with somebody like you all is critical. With the immaturity of this industry, there are a lot of, I don't know, cowboys, people that their ego is bigger than their experience or maybe bigger than their compassion. And so we also encourage our students to be selective. You know, don't compromise your values for a job in this industry just because you think it's so tough to get a job that you have to do that. And some people really put themselves in a position where they get taken advantage of or get treated poorly. And so to work with somebody like Vangst, you know, helps you to vet that employer. They can't guarantee what you're going to encounter, but you have a professional contact of somebody kind of who's helping you through that process, because, you know, sometimes you do place yourself in a situation that's compromising, and there's no need for that.
Yeah, well, and a lot of times we get introduced to individuals that just want to learn about what that professional field looks like for their background. And the first thing that I, you know, advise after getting to know someone's background and understanding what their ideal intentions are is just, you need to do some research on where you actually want to fit into this industry. That's the smartest way. I always like to give the example that, you know, 5 years ago when I wanted to get in the cannabis industry, you know, I was an activist. I was someone who was passionate about the plant. I went into dispensaries trying to get a job and I was too overqualified. And I heard that probably 10 times. And that is infuriating. But if you think about it, my background had nothing to do with retail. I wasn't a, you know, retail manager at Nordstrom. So of course my background is not ideal. And then on top of it, I am overqualified because of my professional experience prior to that. If I were to look back, I would have told myself, well, where do you actually want to fit in? For me, that was Vangst, right? I had, you know, at that point, 5+ years of recruiting experience. It was an ancillary company, not, I think at that point where I thought that I would end up, but I give that advice to people all the time. There are so many jobs now. Figure out where that niche experience can fit in. Don't just assume that it's, you know, still an industry where it's grow operations as well as retail operations. There's now marketing companies. There's tech companies. There are, you know,
finance roles. Sales is another big one we do. Operations, which is a very broad term. You know, you can do operations for cultivation, extraction, production focused roles, retail operations, just general operations. I mean, we have ops people at our company, which is really recruiting and tech.
So really kind of hone in on your skill set and what that ideal space is.
And I've also found, I've worked with a lot of people that have worked in startups where they've had to wear a lot of different hats in the industry. So, you know, I've worked with candidates that have been in, they've worked in the retail side, they've worked in the grow, they've worked in the lab, they, you know, have done some sales, like, and have done a lot of wholesaling. They've worked in the warehouse to do distribution. They've really done it all. So I can really, you know, like Kelsey said, hone in on what their best experience is or how to really sell themselves for different roles.
Right.
So some people definitely will come up with different resumes depending on the role that they're working on, because they say, I have so much experience, but we need to tailor this interview and this role or this resume to this role. So we've definitely done a lot of coaching for that as well.
And thanks for that segue, because I want to ask you next about resumes. I know some people say, well, I've got a resume, it's beautiful, it's always worked for me, or, you know, it's what I used last time. And could you talk us a little bit about how a cannabis resume may be different, or some things to consider that you find yourself coaching a lot of potential employees on?
Sure. I think that the first thing that I always point out is sometimes when I tell someone that they should have a cannabis focused resume, that means that they put it on a template with cannabis leaves on it. It's still a really professional environment. I would say 90% of the clients we work with at this point are looking first and foremost for someone who is professional, someone who's actually able to be a leader and not someone who's just exhibiting this stoner culture per se that a lot of the individuals from the industry years ago had. So the big thing is in general, if you're writing a resume, target it towards the role that you want. So that's where the initial conversation that we have really comes into play. If I'm talking to someone who was a, district manager from Nordstrom, they should have a retail resume for outside the industry, but then they should also have a retail resume catered towards the industry if they have experience within that space as well. The big thing is just treat it like a profession. We hear a lot of our clients say, I just want someone professional. So then we need to train our candidates to treat this like a professional interview as well. You're not necessarily going to be walking into an environment where you can smoke cannabis on the job. These are corporate environments. I even look at ours. We are working in an office space that has individuals from all different types of industries on our same floor. We treat that like a professional role. So treat your resume the same. Have that catered to cannabis, and also work with one of us or whoever you trust to kind of put that together to make sure it's catered towards the role. The big thing is though, with resume writing, nobody wants to do it. I don't even want to do it, and I'm a recruiter. So just make it as simple and easy as possible. If you have a great resume foundation, it should not be hard to flip-flop on some of those details and what you want to highlight. And sometimes that isn't the bulk of your experience, but that's actually done in your cover letter. That's done in your professional summary or a professional overview. So a lot of times I don't even have candidates that I'm working with change too much of the details within their actual resume, but I have them tailor that cover letter to highlight the specific backgrounds that they want to make sure the client sees.
Great point. I hate resumes, honestly. After a while, I get kind of document blind, and they all look the same. And so, is there anything in a cover letter that helps to distinguish that candidate? I know probably clear writing, having a purpose, having nice writing skill or a nice flow. Is there anything else you've seen that's not gimmicky but worth consideration? I know some people will bullet point some experience that directly relates to what the position is asking for. Or is any advice on that front?
Well, a lot of what I do is cultivation and extraction. So a big thing with when I get cultivators that come from the black market, or they've gotten into the industry, but a lot of their previous experience, maybe 10, 15 plus years, has been black market, I tell them to come up with a portfolio. So basically I say, well, yeah, okay, you've been growing 10, 15 years. You do need to shed a little bit more light on that. I'll tell them, obviously, this is a portfolio you're not going to submit for a normal job, but you're going to need to show some pictures of your grow, of the flower that you're producing, talk about different grow mediums you've used. You need to give them more insight into cannabis genetics and strains that you've grown. I think it's really, really important because your resume might have your normal jobs, and then you put a little blurb about cannabis cultivation 2002 to present, and it has some bullet points. But having a portfolio or including information in your cover letter, I think is really helpful, and I think pictures can be really helpful there, so they can really learn and understand better what you're made of as a grower. Because there are, especially a lot of groups I work with, when they're interviewing growers or grow technicians or people to work in their facility, they have a lot of experience in the industry, and they've been growing a long time. So they're not turned off by someone saying they have black market experience, but they do know growing really well. So you can't just claim you're the best grower, but if you shed some light on your experience, you can really, I think, get noticed by companies. So I've recommended that as a portfolio.
Yeah, and if you're not on the production side of things, I typically like to follow a simple step. One, I ask every candidate to send me a list of accomplishments in their industry or in their role, so I can use that as a highlighting point and almost to help coach them. In this as well, it's also formatting that cover letter. So a lot of times what I learned growing up in recruiting in my career is the initial paragraph, maybe make it a 3-paragraph page. The initial paragraph, overview of your background and your intentions, why you're looking to get into this role. Second paragraph, really what your skill sets are that apply to that role. And 3, reiterating your intentions and also showing your genuine interest in that role. So almost tying in a personal effect. So if you're working with company X to interview with their team, maybe you say, you know, for me, I not only want this role because I see that you guys are growing in X way, but I also saw that you were recently highlighted in this magazine and it really brought to fruition the feelings that I want within a company. Little things like that that make it more personalized and also tying into that role specifically would be great, especially if you aren't from the industry. Now, if you are from the industry growing, like Andrew said, it's a little easier to get creative. It's a little easier to play around with the mediums that you're giving that insight with. But when you're coming from outside the industry, it's tying it in. Sometimes it's even being candid. I know that I don't have industry experience, but what I do have is experience in X, Y, and Z, which I believe will be helpful. Also with that, past your cover letter, a lot of times I love when candidates highlight a professional overview. A lot of times people combine those, but there is a really big difference. That professional overview can be focused on that list of accomplishments or just what you know about this industry, right? Little things like that, even under your accomplishments and or certificates on your resume or education, you can add courses like this, you know, part of this seminar, you know, bullet points of what you've learned. You know, I've partnered with a recruiter in this sense. Little things like that just add more validation to your experience within the space or how your experience outside of the industry will bode well for the company.
Great point. Great point. And you both have mentioned a couple times about early days, a few years ago when things just started to now in the transition, you know, early on, you know, I myself had a job with the cannabis industry where there was an office bong and real free open consumption rules as long as you get shit done, so to speak. And, you know, that's less likely these days, but some people think that's a reality in all of this. Yeah. But the trend towards a more corporate professional environment is very real. So I'm glad you mentioned having, you know, some people put cannabis leaves on their resume and stuff like that. They just might, you know, they might not put themselves in the right stack by doing something like that.
Well, yeah, you have to kind of remember it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Mm-hmm. A company cannot put their team at risk by hiring someone that's not going to be cognizant of the compliance as well as the new culture. Since this is a very highly sought after industry, not just on the candidate side, but even on licensing, you know, where a state might only give out X amount of licenses, that means that there's a whole line of people that want to figure out a way to get into this space as well. All it takes is for one employee to have the wrong type of conversation or one employee to have the wrong type of, you know, whatever it may be in an office environment, which causes someone to potentially even lose their license. So for our company, for instance, we work in an office building that required us to have a strict no smoking policy. Little things like that, you realize cannabis isn't just some imaginary industry. We have to fit into normal society. We have to be respectful of not just societal expectations and local government expectations, but also how that's going to affect our long-term reputation in business. So smoking at our desk is a hard no even for us. And at a lot of companies, you can't do that. Even companies that have, you know, a pound of cannabis on your desk that's about to go out for wholesale purposes, you still might not be able to actually touch that product. So it's really understanding that this is a business. This is a very lucrative business. It's also a very a tough business to work in because of that magnifying glass that will always be on you and being cognizant and respectful of that. So that really does start with your first impression. If I send over a resume that has cannabis leaves on it, or someone that's saying things like, I'd love to always just smoke weed and now I want to get into the industry, that could be a red flag for a company. And that's where we try and come in to coach people. Hey, that's not the best approach. We understand what you're trying to say. It's not coming off the right way.
Great. Good point. And like you said, with education showing, like with this, the classes you all are involved in right now, showing the effort you're making to bring yourself up to speed, to be a subject matter expert or working yourself toward that position really does matter, you know, because the stacks of resumes can be, as y'all will, I'm sure, back me up, the stacks of resume to employer can just be overwhelming. So you really want to do everything you can to put yourself in that shorter, more select stack so that, you know, you're showing additional effort and you know, dedication to the cause sort of thing.
Yeah, and that just comes down to, like we said, understanding what role and what industry, what company, at what location you want to be a part of. And that's taking that extra step before you click apply. The amount of times I've talked to candidates and they said, I've applied to every role. I'm like, yeah, but that's not good. That shows that you aren't actually taking that extra 10 minutes to really look into what roles fit your skill set, or what companies or what even spaces within this industry fit your background. If you are someone that comes from, you're a developer, maybe understand that if you're applying to work as a bud tender at a dispensary, that someone's going to overlook your background because you've never worked in a retail environment, you've only worked in corporate settings, little things like that. So either get that experience somehow, whether it's in or outside the industry, and then transition in, or understand that maybe you should be applying somewhere else, get that cannabis industry experience, and then circle back to that job that you originally intended to be a part of.
Great. And Kelsey, you mentioned a bit ago about you started as an advocate. Could you both talk, or either one of you talk about how your role as an advocate or your role or participation in professional organizations might also help you stand apart from other candidates?
Sure. So I'm originally from Washington, D.C., so I'm someone who's always just been really politically charged in things that I do and try and have an intention. Cannabis is something that I always, use as a recreational user for anti-anxiety help from a young age, middle school, high school. It's something that I was really thankful that my parents supported and understood that it was a medicine. I got really involved when my father was going through cancer treatment, and the only thing that helped him stay positive as well as healthy was cannabis. And from there, I went from DC, moved to California, hoping to figure out a way to get in. Somehow ended up in Colorado, walked into a Vangst career fair in 2016, and the 2016 was that career fair. In early 2017, joined Vangst shortly thereafter. So it really was a lot of just chance, but my intention was always to just figure out a place in this industry for myself. It's changed a lot. So, back then I had no idea where to start. Now there's a lot more resources. There's a lot more education. Back then it wasn't even easy to look on Google and find a company to work for. There's so many resources now. There's so many more conventions or meetups. And that's why I always tell people, if you want to get in, just go out and see where you can go meet people. It is the best way. I walked into a random career fair that did not look very legitimate at that time. And
yeah, it was,
and I found my job.
I think our first one.
Yeah.
Went okay. It's definitely an interesting group of people. The people there in business suits, people there with like drug rags, and it was definitely a very, very interesting event. But I also think, as far as advocacy and meeting people locally, you gain a lot more understanding of cannabis culture, which I think is really, really important. And I think a big thing we've seen with bringing more executives in from other industries, and certainly a lot more investment and a lot more people trying to set up companies with corporate backgrounds, is totally not understanding cannabis culture and understanding the roots that have developed over the last 20, 30 years, 40, 50 years more maybe. But basically people coming in and being able to start businesses in the last few years that could be multi-million-dollar businesses, they don't understand the consumer. They don't understand the amount of people that have sacrificed to allow them to be able to actually grow a plant legally and sell it for millions of dollars a year. That's been a big issue, I think, and we're seeing it with like people getting into marketing or sales or other roles where it's very external facing for a company, and they don't understand the culture in cannabis at all. The consumers aren't interested in them at all, and so there's other companies that maybe on the surface, maybe don't look as impressive to certain people. Their culture, their understanding of the industry is a lot better. So the consumers come to them, and actually in a lot of cases find that their products and the way they do business is a lot better. So I found it really important.
And thanks for bringing that up, because boy, if the skate culture was kind of insular and judged people by whether you're real or a poser, and I wasn't a skater, but cannabis has that same sort of cultural snobbery sometimes, where people are like, what do you know? Or, people trying to be the biggest brain in the room on cannabis. And we urge you not to play that game, but to show enough respect for the industry and for the plant itself, to know some history, to understand how the judicial system has affected people of color and has, you know, targeted people for a drug that's not as harmful as aspirin. Yeah. In a lot of cases. And so just having the respect and the know-how to think about those things. I did want to break away and go to some of our student questions. We got a question from Vic, says, I haven't been able to get a job in the industry because I'm overqualified. Could Vic, do you want to talk about that some more, or does that kind of sum it up?
Well, yeah, you know, I've applied at certain places, you know, in the field. I've never gotten a call back. I've put on there that I have a master's degree in education, you know, that I've taught, you know, at the college level. And I've done a lot of studying of the cannabis on my own, and just a lot of history has been just a lot of self-taught stuff, but I've never been in the industry, you know, like, you know, Kelsea was, you know, like mentioning, and it's, my background has been in education for the last 20 years, you know, and I would love to be able to educate, you know, the community, even if it is in Spanish, or just educate the community about, you know, this alternative, you know, and just, you know, how, you know, like I'm passionate about it, but I haven't been able to get in the industry.
Where are you located?
I'm located in Renton. I'm right down the street from about 5 different dispensaries.
Okay, so something
You know,
I like to give people insight on,
yeah.
This industry is not ideal. I probably use that term almost every single day when I'm recruiting. It is not comfortable, it's not ideal, it's not convenient. The reason I use that is because since I'm partnering with companies in brand new markets, I have to somehow convince someone who is loving their life in Colorado or California to move to Oklahoma to open a dispensary. It's not ideal, but it is cannabis, right? Taking that same notion and kind of applying it to individuals that don't have industry experience is not ideal. Walk into a dispensary and see if you can do a part-time bud tending job. Be like, hey, I'm interested. I'm willing to do whatever I can. I have a full-time job. It's going to be really hard. But if you ever need someone on a weekend or a holiday where it's going to be extra busy, let me know, I can help. Little things like that show that you're being proactive, but also that you're going to get that little bit of experience, which will essentially make you more reputable in the space. It's the same thing on like the production or cultivation side. There's so many companies that need trimmers. And yes, that is really difficult, especially if you have a family or you have rent and bills to work a full-time job at, you know, $12 an hour. But if you're able to take one day out of your week or one night out of your week and find a company that's looking for some, you know, seasonal help, all of a sudden you understand what's going on. Understanding that role and how it plays into a bigger picture might actually allow you to get your foot in the door. That's also a good way for you to get to know and shake someone's hand that you never would have even known that they existed. You know, saying, hey, you know, I'm a part-time worker. I really want to get into cannabis education. I'm willing to work for as long as you need. I'm willing to take on these hours, but this is my ultimate goal. So if you ever know anyone in the industry, please let them know. All of a sudden you might be talking to someone who says, we actually need a speaker for this event. This is what you need to prepare. And it could give you your shot. It is not easy to say that to people, but sometimes it is taking that job. When I first joined Vangst, it was not a sure shot that we were going to be successful at all. It was a very, very robust company. I took a major pay cut. I took a major lifestyle shift for me to be successful. But the investment has, you know, given me back, you know, 10, 20 fold. So sometimes it's looking at your schedule and saying, okay, I'm able to commit for the next 6 months, Saturday and Sunday mornings to working. Where can I work? Walking into that dispensary and saying, this is where I shop. I really love you guys. I want to make an effort. If you guys have any temporary openings, I would love to figure out a way I can help. Depending on your state, and I know everyone's in different states, sometimes that means that you have to get some sort of permit, badge, background check executed to work in the industry. Be proactive about that. Some states require you to work in the industry before you can apply for those local needs. But what you can do is also proactively to get that. So in Colorado, we have our badge. That's something that anyone in the public can get to work in the industry. If you have that, all of a sudden you are part of an even smaller demographic of people who are looking to get in, because sometimes people wait until they get a job to have everything in place. So little things like that. Also networking. If you network, you will find that someone's willing to give you an opportunity. And sometimes it is humbling yourself and saying, while you might be fantastic in one industry, you don't really have anything in this industry yet. And that's harsh. And that's not easy to admit to yourself. But sometimes you have to say that and be humbled before you can be welcomed in, right? A lot of times I'll talk to someone, I've been doing marketing for, Nordstrom for my entire career. I am the best of the best. And they come in with an arrogant perspective and they think that they're going to change this industry. And that's a huge turnoff for a lot of people. So it's humbling yourself, being realistic about what that background's going to look at, and then go from there. If you can take on a part-time bud tending job, a trimming job, anything for 3 months, all of a sudden you have 3 months more experience than you did a few weeks, months, years ago, and you might actually get that call back. That paired with a great cover letter, as well as good skill sets and interviewing, you might actually be able to land a job that you wanted, but couldn't even think about attaining a couple months before.
Okay.
Super. Thank you. And you also said about meeting people. Check out Meetup if you don't have the Meetup app in your local area. I know that's one of the ways I got started here when we moved to Seattle and I knew no one here in the cannabis industry. And LinkedIn is a fantastic tool too. You're going to get a lot of spam and a lot of people want to sell you lights or random stuff that you are not in the market for. But if you can wade through that, find some good industry people that you trust, that you respect, then you can follow their conversations and the things that they post and the things that matter to them, so that when you do go in for an interview and they ask, hey, what do you think about this move by the DEA on CBD? You'll at least know what they're talking about. You don't have to have the answers, but you can be part of the conversation. And as somebody here in the industry says, and it's an old saying, but if you're not at the table, you're likely on the menu, right? So put yourself in the room as much as possible. And that might just be a local meeting that looks like, not very fancy and not very meaningful, but you'll have more friends in the industry than you had before. Can we go to Joshua? Josh, you have a question. You said, how would you suggest selling yourself on genetics, specifically breeding? Could you talk a little bit more about what you meant there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually been scoping out a job that is in a different state, and I believe I have all the qualifications that they're looking for, minus the breeding part of it. I've worked in a cultivation facility in Massachusetts going through medicinal to recreational. I worked my way up inside of that to become an assistant manager down there, running that. And then I ran through 2 different courses on cannabis, one of them being specifically genetics and cultivation, the botany of the plant, the other one being a more generalized discussion of cannabis and what it is today. So I'm just curious, Andrew, I noticed you said something, you had a little bit of a background in cultivation and growing and stuff like that. How would you pose yourself to someone who's looking for breeding? I have a general idea of what it takes to breed stuff. Obviously, it's much more in depth than just that, but something that I feel comfortable learning. But I don't necessarily have the ability to do it offhand. That's something I think takes a lot of time and a lot of growing experience. I grow a little bit here, but not to the capacity where I can actually breed. So how would you suggest selling yourself in that way, where you have an understanding yet you don't have the experience behind it?
That's definitely a good question, and I like your experience, and that you having worked in a commercial grow facility, I think is a big plus when you're applying for roles. I would say, like I mentioned, with cover letters and portfolios, I think it's really helpful to explain in a cover letter or like a paragraph or some form how you got that general understanding of plant breeding. A lot of grow candidates in their resume, they're going to have genetics as a bullet point and plant breeding as a bullet point.
Sure.
It doesn't really tell the extent of their actual experience and their expertise. And so a lot of employers are just going to go straight to the resume, look at your, what's been your experience at this commercial grow? How is that relevant to my job? And you can expand on it a lot more in a in a cover letter. And here, yeah, you mentioned you've taken botany courses, you've done a lot of research, different books, different resources out there that are freely or readily available for people. Shows that you've taken the initiative, you have gained an understanding of what it's going to take. You just haven't had the opportunity in your current situation to do it. I think you having already worked in a commercial facility, I think a lot of people would be interested, but you just need to make sure to expand on it and expand on how you got that general understanding. What is the work and the research you've done to get to that point? Because I think, I'm not sure if you're applying for a role that's very specific to plant breeding or just that they want it as part of your overall skill set.
Yeah, it was more so an overall skill set. What they're looking for is someone to start a cultivation facility that is focused on boutique style growing. So they wanted to start their own proprietary strain, and I believe that that's what they're looking for, is somewhat of their own brand. So during that, I just wanted to see which way I should pitch it a little bit, get your advice on that, because sometimes I do hear, I applied here in Hawaii a couple of times to the 2 different dispensaries here, and I was actually told we wanted somebody with less experience so we can train them, and that was kind of difficult to deal with, because I was like, I can learn whatever way possible, but you won't even give me that chance, but it was something I'm a little cognizant of, and I want to make sure that whenever I pitch myself to this place, I have something to work with as far as with genetics and botany and things of that such. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
The plant behind you looks healthy, if that's any sign of some of your skills.
Yes, thankfully, It's maybe because of this good spectrum that it's working underneath here.
That helps. Yeah, we can't be out this early in this area. Hey, Andrew, how do you feel about the term master grower? I know that gets thrown around a lot.
I don't use it, and especially getting started in Denver 3.5 years ago. That was all. By that point, that term was not really used anymore. It was looked down on or laughed at by people. Mm-hmm. Head grower, director of cultivation, cultivation manager, grow manager, all these different titles are really the ones that are used now. I mostly see master grower out of California, and it's people that have been on the black market. And so when I'm kind of coaching them on how to present their experience, I tell them that master grower is typically not a good term to use. And part of that's that they a lot of them, it comes with an ego of them thinking they're the best grower out there. Mm-hmm. But of course they've met plenty of other growers, but they haven't looked at the entire industry versus someone like myself or people that have interviewed a lot of growers for their company. Mm-hmm. In the industry tend to look at that term and say, no, this person hasn't really broken into the industry or still thinks they're the best grower out there.
Well, and you also have the big gap in a lot of these people that are saying that, even when we are partnering with these individuals, which is you haven't worked in a compliant market. You're working with someone who's maybe been growing cannabis in a spectacular way in Humboldt County, but they've never actually used metric. They've never actually used some of these programs or worked in facilities where they are literally going to have cameras above every single step of their work process. They're going to need to verify that they're using things. They can't use specific pesticides. They can't use specific methodologies because either they're not legal or it's not what the company wants. And kind of circling back to your experience, I think that like I said before, being humble and saying what you don't know and also using that to your strength. I think the big thing that I always like to tell people is there's one quality that everyone has the potential of having, which makes you a great candidate for a company. And that is if you're going to be a good culture add to their team. If you are someone that is lacking a little bit of experience, but has that almost like je ne sais quoi of like personality or ambition, they're gonna take a chance on you. I can guarantee you that. The amount of times that even Vangst internally, they do not have the best recruiting experience or they don't know about this industry, but they just care. They are so deeply passionate. They are willing to admit, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I'm willing to learn. That goes a really long way because that shows that you're going to go through the strides, right? So sometimes admitting that you don't have that experience, but saying that you're passionate and you want to learn it takes you a lot further. And even if those companies are saying you're overqualified, saying, that's great. I want to humble myself and act like I am a novice in this sense because I want to learn a different methodology. And I would love if you gave me an opportunity. In turn, you know, I understand that you might look at my resume, but I hope you looked at my ambition as well. And kind of switching the conversation so that they can't focusing on you're too much or too little, but that you're actually someone who's just willing. Sometimes that goes a long way too.
And Josh, the way you, or Joshua, the way you asked that question it showed your humility. And so I think, thank you both for, it's a good note, because certainly some people come in feeling they have all the answers. They've, you know, I've smoked weed for 20, 25 years, and I know, and that gets real old in a work environment real fast. And
that's if you don't mind me saying real quick, that's honestly why I was asking. It's one of those things where I realize how novice and new I am at this, but I want to sell myself as that ambition, as that young person who's ready to take on whatever task they have. So hopefully we start to see more companies looking for people like that.
Great. And we got time for a couple more questions. While we're waiting, if anybody has a question, just let us know. I have a question in the chat on the right. Let me ask you both if any of our students would like to engage Vangst, and not only to search online for the available positions, but you know, want to post their resume and maybe get some advice. How would they go about doing that? Does it cost them any money? Could you explain how to get involved with Vangst?
Sure. Our website's the best way. You can send in a request to get information. You can also connect with any of us on LinkedIn. We're always more than willing to talk to people, even if they don't have an ideal background. Since we do have two different service offerings for the clients that we partner with, sometimes looking at our website and specifically applying to a role is great, but sometimes it is just making a connection. So just saying hello. If you notice that there's a cannabis conference locally, you can always look there and see who from Vangst will be there so you can network in person. But if you go to vangst.com, you'll be able to see where you can actually apply for any of the roles we have posted, or just send a note to our general mailbox. We do have a full customer service team that after they connect and you send them your resume proactively, they will connect you with the right person or people on our team, and then we can really just take it from there. Andrew and I, you can look at our LinkedIn, feel free to send us a message and connect with us. We always love talking to people. For us, 30 minutes is not that much time, but for you, it might be really, really valuable to just give you insight on the best way to approach things. That being said, we do have a database where we take all of our notes. So if I am talking to you and I say, hey, this candidate's fantastic, this is what their skill set is, anybody on our team nationwide can actually look at that database and say, that person's perfect for this role, I'm going to reach out to them. So it is a collective effort on our end once we make contact.
Great. Thank you. We're going to turn to Chuck. Chuck, you have a question or two? Hey, Chuck, we got you, man. Can you hear me? Chuck, we can't hear you.
I had myself muted. Sorry. Sorry. Hey, everybody.
Yeah,
a few questions. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm clear. Students who come to you for help finding a job, do you charge your fee to the students or to the hiring companies?
Only for the company.
Yeah, the company. Yeah, candidates never pay anything to us.
That's good to know. Can you speak to having to move out of state for opportunities? So, for instance, Victor, in Washington, probably nobody's looking for an MED for anything out here, right? But in Illinois, they might be in desperate need of your services. So, Vangst, do you have a sense of how many people would need to leave their home state to a new and emerging state for a professional level opportunity?
Okay.
It definitely increases your likelihood of getting a job if you're open to relocation.
I'd say Kelsey and I specifically, because she does retail, so people have done retail management. I do cultivation extraction. Those are three of the main skill positions in the industry that experience already in the industry, and being able to come into a new company and hit the ground running, especially a startup, can be really, really helpful. So we have, I'd say probably the majority of my roles have been relocation positions. I think same with Kelsey. In a lot of cases, people that already have a great background in the industry, running grows, running labs, running a dispensary or a chain of dispensaries, and also is good enough that they can go to a new state with new regulations, new climate, new everything, and hopefully replicate that success. So I like that you mentioned Illinois, because that is definitely a market where I've done a few placements recently in cultivation extraction, because groups are dramatically expanding their production facilities and also applying for licenses. So if they get a license this summer, they're going to try and hire candidates through us to move out there. And they might be 100-person company once they really get up and going. They're a 3-person company right now, but they need a few really critical positions in the early stages to help them get off the ground. So someone who's set up and run a grow already, they relocate that person. Same with the dispensary. The rest of the talent or the rest of the people, they mostly source locally because it's people that they feel they can train. But someone who's never run a grow at the scale, a company in a state like Illinois needs, it's definitely a gamble hiring someone to be your director of cultivation who's local in Illinois. So you might look in Colorado, California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada. Those have definitely been big markets for us.
Chuck, what's your professional background? Can you give us a high-level overview of it?
Yes, so years in healthcare, but as far as cannabis, 20 years on the management staff of Seattle Hemp Fest, privately. Professionally now, 20 years ago, I worked as a scale technician, grocery stores, warehouses. In 2013, when Washington started pulling its cannabis industry together, I founded a dime bag scale company. The Dime Bag Scale Company is a Washington State registered scale company focused on the high-quality jewelry balances that all producers, processors, and some retailers need. Moving east, as we get more mainstream, less of that old way of expressing ourselves. Moving east needs to be a little more corporate. DigitalBalanceServices.com is my business now. And I have an online marketplace where producers, processors, and retailers can buy their traceability equipment, point-of-sale terminals.
Are there specific
Along the way, I've helped a lot of companies with traceability. So my particular expertise is traceability and compliance.
Got it. So that type of skill set, I was going to say, it depends what type of role you're looking for or what type of company you're ideally targeting. People with your background might say a company like Metric or MJ Freeway would be a great transition point because they know compliance. They've worked on the technical side of things. The big thing is kind of circling back to the initial point I made. Do your research, figure out specific companies and target them, figure out specific verticals and target them. And what you're saying, yes, relocation is, for me, something that I feel is very helpful if you're looking for roles in cannabis and you even have an inkling of experience. That goes back to cannabis is not convenient or ideal. That might mean that you move to, Missouri for a year to get that experience because that's where that company really needs you. So yes, being flexible in that sense, but two, it's also just targeting where you feel comfortable and what companies you think will actually enhance your background and where you can enhance their team. So almost taking it a step back and saying, what are the 5 companies I'd really be excited to work for? Where are they located? And can I see myself working there? And then really take it step by step from there.
So thank you for that. I have one more question. I've got my list done. So great to suggest focusing on a specific employer versus a specific job. I want to work for Metric. I want to work for Tilt. I want to work for Cureleaf, large companies. For students out there looking for jobs, if you don't hook up with a employment agency like Vangst, there's a website you should know about called jobscan.com. You copy and paste your resume into it. You copy and paste the job description into it, and it reconciles the two, so that you can send that custom resume to that specific job description. And my last question, having said that, Vangst, when you're dealing with students all over the country looking for jobs, professionals looking for jobs, a lot of people looking for jobs these days are exposed to computer-based robotic hiring. Resume gets scanned by a robot before it even sees a human. Some companies are giving web-based interviews before you see a human. I'm hoping that in cannabis it's still pretty much human to human, or are you seeing do you guys serve as the robot? Is hooking up with a human employment agency a way to skirt around being shut out by a computer?
Sure. Really great question. Part of our team is actually working on building some of those, matching type encouragers, I would say, or different options for the companies that we partner with. But to be honest, it is still an industry where it is very small. A handshake goes a lot further than just a resume or a phone call. It's something that I believe truly. I could apply for a job at Vangst 100 times, but if you happen to go to a conference where our CEO is speaking and you shake her hand, that's something that someone's going to remember. And I apply that to out of the industry as well. Andrew and I both come from years of recruitment experience before getting with Vangst. And we typically remember people by their resume because that's just how our brain works now. But if we actually meet someone, shake their hand and understand their intentions and they can communicate well, that's something that we definitely keep at the forefront of our mind. So yes and no, I think cannabis is still a little old school in that sense, but it is modernizing. There are specific companies that want to utilize a much quicker process in that sense. So we are building out processes to help with that. But I would say 90% of the companies we work with want that boutique white glove treatment where they are finding that specific person, and finding that specific person doesn't come from a resume matching service. That comes from conversations, trust being built, et cetera. Circling back to when I was talking about being a culture ad for a team, how is a computer and how is a program going to be able to say, this person is going to have what you need? This person is going to be that individual that says, I'm not just in a job, but I am that person that will blend all of these departments together and make us a full circle service or company. It really just depends on the company you're working with. The reason that we have clients around the world that reach out to us versus just looking at Indeed or LinkedIn or job postings themselves is because they want more than just a resume. They want more than just an applicant. They want someone who is actually going to enhance their team, not just in their skill set, but also in their personality and experiences.
And
thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck. And boy, Kelsey and Andrew, thank you so much. You really, you shined and you represented your company really well today. Y'all and students, those of you who showed up and those of you who will watch this recording, you're already beginning to do some of this networking by being on calls like this, by asking good questions, by trying to focus your skills in a way that an employer can see you best and recognize those skills. So, as far as representing your company and giving some people today a first taste of Vangst, the fact that you both came in on a Saturday to make this call is exceptional. And so that everybody knows, it was not on very much the request. I didn't give them a whole lot of lead time. So I can't thank you both enough. I want to follow up with you on the backside. Victor, I know you had another question, but I'm sorry. I want to respect your time, and I'm going to ask you to contact them directly so you can follow up.
I can very quickly say it certainly will help if you have some exposure already to the industry. With marketing or interacting with different stores and farms is definitely helpful. When I was mentioning culture, that's a big thing, is understanding the culture, understanding the supply chain of how everything works in cannabis definitely can be helpful. So it's worth putting on if you're applying for jobs.
Fantastic. Hey, thank you all for being part of this. Like I said, this effort is kind of new for us, the Saturday Sesh. Vangst, we hope that you'll keep an eye out for Academy of Cannabis Science students. We got a lot of hardworking folks from all over, and we will certainly encourage them to look you up. Y'all have been stellar today. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
If you guys have another session you need help with, feel free to reach out. We'd be more than happy to help.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And want to put a plug in to Seattle students or Seattle area students. Within the hour, I'm going to post up a form so you can sign up for 2 upcoming farm tours that are coming up in the next 6 weeks. One to Dogstar Cannabis, another one to Solstice Cannabis. That's a tier 2 and a tier 3 respectively. We're going to ask you just sign up for one, but you all get the first notice on that. So you got some priority to know that that's coming up. And for those of you who've not walked through a commercial grow, it's hard to describe it. It's just, it's a terpene overload and a great experience. So we hope that you'll join us for that. Hey, thank you everybody today. Thank you both. And we hope you have a fantastic Saturday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.